That's why we have such a radically different race of humanity, because there's such a wealth of different experiences. And the reason that we are called into community is because we need all of those different experiences to make the kingdom of God. The second sin that made that sin happen, that separated the man from the community, is the sin of not seeing. And it's not the blind man who doesn't see. This is the wonderful joke of this passage, that it's the blind man that really sees what happened, and it is everybody else that just can't see that this was an act of God. Not recognizing the blind man because he was not where they expected. He wasn't doing what they expected. Every day they walked past him begging for money, and they just took it for granted that he would be there every day. Do they even notice that he can now see? The other sin is not seeing Jesus for who Jesus is, for refusing to admit that Jesus has the ability to heal us in ways that we cannot explain, in ways that we have trouble putting into words, in ways that affect us, heart and soul, but we just can only tell people it was mud and water, but now I'm different. Now I see the world with such brilliance. Who do we not see in the world? Where do we judge others when we also enforce an unfair system? I think sometimes the reason we choose to not see those with disabilities or those with abilities that are different from ours is because it makes us uncomfortable, thinking that it might be our responsibility to alleviate some of their suffering. And that's true. It is our responsibility to alleviate suffering where we see it. And also sometimes we don't see those with some sort of differing ability because it reminds us of how fragile life is and how easily it could be us that has that disability, that could be functioning differently in the world. The Lord of the Rings that I've been talking about has this wonderful relationship between a dwarf and an elf. Gimli the dwarf and Legolas the elf. These races do not like each other. For generations going past in the story, they distrusted each other, and in fact many would say were enemies of each other. And yet these two individuals are called into the Fellowship of the Ring that is attempting to destroy the powerful ring that is trying to control them all. And so they are joined together by a common purpose. And through the course of the story, this dwarf and elf become friends. But they had more than one reason. It wasn't just that their races didn't like each other. It's also that Legolas's father, the elf's father, imprisoned the dwarf's father in The Hobbit. So they have a personal reason to distrust each other, because one has been mistreated by the other. But as the story goes on, things happen in Gimli's life, in the group, that open the elf's eyes to who Gimli is, and a friendship forges between them. And in that story, they forge a friendship that shows people how to resolve prejudices, how to set aside differences. And it's a really helpful thing to remember that when you are overcoming a prejudice, when you are starting to look at somebody differently than you used to, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments, in the everyday, here and now. For Gimli and Legolas, it was when they went through the Lothlorien woods, owned by the elves, and they didn't want to lead the dwarf to where the queen was unless they blindfolded him. And he had a temper, and he said, absolutely not, you are not going to blindfold me. I don't trust you to keep me safe on this journey. And so there they are at an impasse. They have to go through these woods to complete their journey, but the dwarf will not go any further because he feels like he's been mistreated. So the ruler, the leader of the fellowship, Aragorn, says, okay, we will all be blindfolded, Legolas the elf included. So they blindfolded every single one of that fellowship, and by that way, they went forward. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at this passage. that if one person cannot see, we will all not see together. What would have happened in that community if they had done that for the blind man? If one person cannot operate the way that we operate, we will all accommodate him. There was I don't know if I'm going to remember it correctly now, there was a video that went viral, I think 6 or 9 months ago. And it was a deaf person who went through the world, and his community around him planned this out for months. Every person that man met his whole day signed. Everybody that went past him on the street talked to him by signing. Every person that he encountered at the counter of McDonald's or the restaurant, every taxi driver that he met, every person he saw that day functioned the way he did. What a gift to give somebody, to say you are that important to our community that we want you to be a part of this, and we will accommodate you. We are capable of changing our resolutions. We are capable of changing our perspectives, and when we do so, the world becomes so much richer. The kids' book that I wanted to read, that is far too long to read, was The Grand Mosque of Paris. And this is a story that has multiple stories in it. It's the Grand Mosque of Paris, where story after story of Muslims during World War II hid and sheltered Jews, brought them into the confines of their compound there, arranged for their safe travel outside of Paris, outside of Nazi-occupied France, so that they could be safe. They saved thousands. Sometimes they kept somebody for a few days, sometimes they kept somebody for months. There was a cemetery within the compound. They had somebody engrave the family name of one gentleman so they could prove to the Nazis when they came that this man's grandfather had converted and was buried there. So he was, of course, safe here. They sheltered children. The doctors there treated them, cared for them. Did you know that just last month there was a large response from the Muslim community in America when several Jewish cemeteries were vandalized? In Philadelphia, over 150 graves were knocked over in a bout of anti-Semitism and vandalism. And a Muslim activist who lived nearby heard about this the very next day and rallied some strong men in his community and took them over, and they helped fix what gravestones they could fix physically. And then they raised money, and their goal was to raise $20,000 to help this cemetery repair the damaged gravestones. Within 24 hours, they had raised nearly $150,000. So they helped that cemetery, and they helped out the cemetery in St. Louis and multiple cemeteries throughout America that had been marginalized, victimized by the greater population. Have you heard that Muslims formed a chain to protect Coptic Christians while they were worshiping during the Arab Spring in 2012? And that same group of Christians then did the same thing for their Muslim brothers and formed a chain around them during their prayer time and devotions so they would be safe from the violence that was happening. With the uptick in Islamophobia that often happens when we focus on the actions of extremists, there are some Muslims in England who do not feel safe wearing their traditional garb. And one woman saw another woman starting to take her hijab off on a public transportation because something had just happened in London the day before, and she was afraid of being targeted for looking different. And so out of that experience rose the hashtag, I'll ride with you. If you are feeling unsafe traveling, people who are not Muslims said that they would travel with Muslims wherever they needed to go. On the bus, you just hit the hashtag and where you're traveling and where you would like to go, and somebody will make sure that you have somebody with you so that you are safe so that you are not targeted by people who are afraid of differences. Christians and Muslims on a bus in Africa several years ago, 2015, were stopped by the Islamic extremist group Al-Shabaab. And just several weeks before that, another bus had been stopped, and the group had been separated into Muslims and Christians, and the Christians were all murdered. So when this bus was stopped, the Muslims refused to separate from the Christians. And they said, either you kill all of us or you leave us alone. And the extremist group left the area. When we resolve our conflicts, something powerful can happen in the world. Do you see how easy it is to overlook the healing of the world? It happens in everyday moments. Sometimes it's heroic, like those people on the bus who put themselves on the line, but other times it's just making somebody who's different feel comfortable, asking them if you can help them, or making sure that they know, no, it's no bother for me to wait for you. You are not an imposition in this world. You do not have to apologize for being different than anybody else. So we come to the last resolution. To make resolutions, to have a firm commitment, to decide to make a change in your life. The two terms, to be resolute or to make resolutions, one indicates decisiveness and firmness, and the other one hopes for positive change within yourself. They both have to be balanced. You can be firm, but also be hoping for positive change. So you have to be balanced and yet always willing to move. That's a hard balance to get. Could it be that God is asking you to remove your cataracts and fix your focus in the world? To fix your focus so that you focus on the problem that God would like to see healed, and wonder that is God's healing in the world and in your life. Where is God healing you? Where is God healing your relationships? Where is the deep healing that is needed in our world? If Jesus names a sin in this passage, it is the sin of certainty. It is the sin of knowing without a doubt what is right and what is wrong, and knowing how and when to do the right thing. It's that certainty that Jesus says is wrong of the Pharisees. So, how is God asking you to be uncertain? To be looking at things from a different perspective? To see a rabbit instead of a duck, or a duck instead of a rabbit? How is God changing your perspective so that you may experience a deeper healing, so that the world may experience a deeper healing? The blind man gets it. He says, I know one thing. Once I was blind, but now I see. So keep asking yourself, what's the one thing that you know because you have met Jesus? What's the one wonderful way that he has transformed your sight and your life? How do you view the world differently now that Jesus has opened your heart? And is there room for more growth? There is a Jewish proverb that is also an Islamic hadith that says, save one life and it is as if you've saved all of humanity. Even if that life is yours. It is so very important. Know that love prevails, love wins, and love, God's love, will see us through. Go be open to the vision of God, to see your siblings in the world, to be open to the changing of your mind, because God is always, always calling us to change. Let us pray. Keep us from our self-imposed blindness, Jesus. Hold our heads firmly in your grasp so